I'm not really benefiting from betting like jacks through sixes. But again, betting threes, fours, and fives, potentially we get some better hands to fold, right? We could start getting some queen x, maybe some king x hands to fold. It'd be interesting to take a look at that. Basically, today's session is going to be split into 3 parts. And we're going to be looking at ace-high boards, monotone boards, and paired boards for this same situation: button versus small blind versus big blind, 30 big blinds deep. So to begin with, we're going to look at some ace-high boards, and you can see here the first one is ace-king-queen. Now, before we get into that, I actually want to bring up something else, which is this, which is the aggregated reports from DTO post-flop. Yes, we're going to be using DTO three-way today, but one of the other tools that DTO has is DTO post-flop for heads-up spots. So this is going to look at button versus big blind. The reason why I've brought this up is because I want to show the differences and the similarities between strategies when it's button versus big blind versus when it's button versus small blind versus big blind. And we're going to be focusing on this exactly the same board. And you can see it's right at the top there, ace, king, queen. So this is, again, 30 big blind, button versus big blind, single raise pot. And you can see this is the highest frequency check, but it's really, really low frequency. It's 3% check. You can see that, hopefully, at the top of the screen. So basically, it's just a range bet board, right? But not for a small size, but for a big size. Button's going to have a lot of really strong hands on this board, which includes sets and 2-pair and straights, whereas the big blind is going to be missing hands like ace king, ace queen, and sets, right? So they're just be able to push that advantage. They're also going to be missing, ace jack, ace 10, stuff like that. So the equity for the button is a lot higher. You can see that on the far right hand side, which is this way. So yeah, 64%. So you really get to push that by using big bets. So the reason why I'm going to show you this first is because the strategy is very different from this. When we look at, we add another party into there. We add the small blind in. So the first thing is, I'm just going to pull this in. I just showed you like the equity for just button versus big blind was like 60+%, right? This is the equities for everybody across the board. Hopefully you can see this okay. So this is how we're looking. You can see the small blind's equity is actually quite similar to the buttons here, whereas the big blind has the widest range, and therefore compared to the other two ranges is the weaker of the three, right, or the weakest of the three. So if we go in and we put in this board, which is ace king queen, and we run it again, we're going to see some interesting things, I think. I did a session before on small blind strategy in these multi-way spots, and there were some boards where the small blind gets to do some leading, and what I think is probably a potentially a misconception is that, well, on this board the button must be must have the better range, and you can see equity wise that's not the case. Yes, the small blind's playing out of position, but you can see here 48% equity. That's pretty huge. The button's got 37 and the big blind has just 15%. So really, still a really, really bad board for the big blind. But now the equity's switched or split across 3 rather than just 2. So this might mean, spoiler alert, this might mean that the small blind gets to do some leading. Now we're not looking at what the small blind does today. We're going to see what the button strategies look like. But as you can see, small blind gets to lead a huge amount. So that's really, really important when the solver's working out what the button should do, if it assumes the small blind's playing correctly and is going to lead as aggressively as this. All right, so using that small size and betting very aggressively. Small blind checks, and big blind, you saw, has really, really lousy equity. Yes, can have some really strong hands. Having said that, there's no Jack 10 in this spot. There is some King Queen though. So yes, can have some 2 pairs. Really missing out on all of these ace X hands and no straights. So yeah, and obviously no sets. So it's just a lousy situation for the big blind. And then for the button, we saw before it was primarily big bet. And let's have a look now. So There is still some big betting. You can see the kind of hands that would want to big bet, like basically the best top pair hands, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9. But really, we're looking at a lot of small betting and then a huge amount of checking as well. So the strategy is very different. We've added that small blind in, and the strategy does change. All right. So that's the first thing I wanted to address on this board. We don't have, as the button in this three-way spot, we don't have the equity advantage. And the small blind is supposed to lead a lot. When they don't lead, it's fairly interesting to think about, how that shifts. And now you can see we still check 35% of the time. There is a little bit of big betting with our best top pair hands, but there's also quite a lot of small betting. So what we could do is to have a quick think about, a quick look at what we're doing here with different hands. So there's a lot of betting with ace-x. Interestingly, ace-queen suited does some checking. Let's see if we can get this. So there is some checking with ace-queen, but a lot of betting with the best ace-x hands. Top set gets to mix as well, but kings, queens get to bet very frequently. And you can see there's sort of like this D-linear, I guess, whether we'd use the word D-linear, I'm not sure. But betting the best ace-x and then checking more frequently the weaker the kicker. And then the same thing going on with some king-x. And once we get down to sort of king 7, king 6, king 5, just doing a lot more checking. And there is some betting going on with these weaker king-x hands. Looks like king-x of diamonds, though, with I presume that's the backdoor flush draw, is doing a lot of checking. And then queen x, you see a lot of checking here. Queen jack and queen 10 have a pair and a gut shot, a little bit more equity. Whereas these queen x hands are not really benefiting from betting. You might wonder then, well, why does queen 3 start betting? My best guess for this is that by betting queen 3, we can actually generate folds from better hands. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. But then other hands, not really benefiting from betting, like jacks through 6s. But again, betting 3s, 4s, and 5s, potentially we get some better hands to fold, right? We could start getting some queen x, maybe some king x hands to fold. It'd be interesting to take a look at that. So it's quite a lot of hands here. We have about half the deck, right? So we can try and memorize it, but we also want to think about why. Trying to memorize the strategy here is going to be very tough because there's, this is ace king queen board, might be, then we memorize ace king jack, ace king 10, ace king 9, so on and so forth. It just becomes, quite challenging to try and study every single board. So we really want to just understand the why a little bit more. And I think doing some drills now is going to really, really help with that. Before we do that though, I just want to see what happens. So remember we saw queen 3 bet quite frequently. I'm going to turn relative on. Now you can see there's not many hands in the small blind range anymore because they lead so frequently, right? So I'm going to change it to relative just so you can see and visualize the actual hands in this range. So it's basically made everything full frequency, right? But we know that's not the case. Now we're certainly not getting better queen x hands to fold in this spot. So that's probably not correct. Let's have a look at the big blind though. So when we bet a hand like queen 3, the big blind is folding queen 8 of hearts, queen 8 of clubs. So there are some better hands folding. There's even some king x hands folding as well. So you've got some offsuit queen x hands folding, some suited kings folding. So that's potentially why we start to see some some betting from queen 3, getting some better queen x hands and some king x hands to fold. Does that all make sense so far? Let me know in the chat. So I think if we do go in and start drilling, I think there's a lot of hands that are going to be mixes, but there are quite a few hands that need to be checked back. We saw some earlier, like the king x of diamond hands, especially the weaker ones that are going to struggle to get value. If we start betting, if our opponents are folding some queen x hands, right? So if the big blind folds some queen x hands, it becomes more challenging to get value by betting your weakest king x hands, right? So, yeah. we're gonna start checking back some hands. But I think what's going to happen through this, and just what, you know, if you've seen any of these streams or sessions before, you know that we want to make mistakes so that we know where the flaws are and the holes are in our strategy. Very high frequency bet. That was my best guess for this. I assume similar thing going on here. But interestingly, there must be some big betting going on. This is a very, very big bet. I'm not sure why the bet size has chosen to be this big. It's certainly bigger than, say, 3E geometric size, but there's probably a reason why. But I think, you know, you bet this size, there's going to be 19 in the middle, 21 back. So it'd be interesting to see how what the turn sizes look like. I think I would have liked to see a slightly smaller big bet size, but you know, this is what we're working with, and there isn't much big betting in the first place anyway. So it's really good though that the two bet sizes are very distinct. I think sometimes you can set a sim up so that, you know, the two bet sizes are way too similar, and that's just not going to work very well. So yeah, it must be some big betting going on in here as well. I assume small bet and some checking. Okay, so there's actually all of the things going on, but the highest frequency line here is actually to check. So we do want to have some of those ace-x hands. Queen 9 is just pure check. That's good. I'm glad I caught that. 6-5 is just a really lousy hand. We block a lot of the hands that will just auto fold. We're up against two players. So yeah, mainly going for a check here. This will be a mix between check and small bet, I assume. There's a tiny bit of big betting as well. Queen 10, we saw this earlier on that the pair and draw type hands were going to go ahead and bet more frequently. But again, there's some big betting going on here. Flush draw, interesting. Yeah, okay, so this is something that I mean, this was just a bit of a guess. But seeing this weak flush draw, just go for a check fairly frequently. Just the kind of hand if you do face a check raise, you're obviously going to continue, but you've got a 5 high flush draw. So we are going to be checking back some hands. So thinking about, you know, what kind of hands we're going to check back. We saw top set checks back. There are mixes between check and bet. We've got some flush draws in there as well. And then we saw ace-8 of hearts, for example, a fairly high frequency check. So if we are going to check, we can't just check all of our sort of medium strength hands and then bet our best ones. We sometimes have to have hands like top set that blocks a lot of continues, and also some top pairs that will be able to continue on various runouts, various turns and rivers, facing aggression. You know, if we bet all of those strong hands, we're just left with hands like this, or with King X or Queen X, then we're going to really struggle when the small blind and big blind decide to put lots of money in. Eights without a spade. I think my intuition says that we should just do a lot of checking here. Okay, that's good. Same thing going on. We had Queen 10 on earlier on. Queen 6, this just strikes me as a hand that's just not strong enough to bet. You could generate folds from slightly better hands, but you do block some of those hands, like Queen 9 of hearts, for example. So, and then it's only a few King X hands that actually fold too. So I think mostly check. Okay, here's 100% check. That's good. Similar thing going on here with the 6-5, I think. Just a very high frequency check. Ace-Deuce. We saw this earlier on, like you're betting your best ace-x and you're checking the weaker ones. So I would assume this is a higher frequency check. And as you can see, it is. Eights we saw earlier on. It's just going to go for a check. Threes. Now, threes is where we can start, again, generating folds from some Queen X and King X. So I think we do start to see some betting here. Okay, that's good to see. Ace-8. So Ace-8 of hearts earlier on was a check. But Ace-8 of diamonds has a bit more equity. I think we'll still see some checks. Okay, that's incorrect. That's good. This is really, really good. So Ace-8 of hearts, for obvious reasons, we don't have the backdoor flush draw. Here we have the backdoor flush draw. We can bet, face check raise. So we just have more equity, more, good things can happen on the turn. This is a mixture of all things, I think. Yeah, quite a lot of big betting, though. Assume we're betting here, just a lot of equity. Mixing. Okay. So this is fairly interesting. I think we saw earlier on Ace-Eight of diamonds, kind of a similar hand, you know, in the sense that we have a pair with a middling card plus a backdoor flush draw. The difference here is that, I mean, Ace-Eight of diamonds draws to the nut backdoor flush draw, whereas this doesn't. So I think there's you know, some similarities in the type of hand, but actually thinking about, you know, if it goes spade spade, having the 7 high flush draw, and yeah, okay, it'll be the ace high flush draw, but with the 7, is that going to be that, you know, that good? That's something just to, you know, to think about. But yeah, just continue to bet. We saw this was very high frequency check from earlier. This is going to be a bet. Ace Queen actually did some checking, I think, so just to keep an eye on that, but we're mainly betting. 8-6 of diamonds, really not sure with this sort of category of hand. So the backdoor flush draw, but I mean, it's very, very weak. We can certainly get some better hands to fold, of course. You know, some 9 high, 10 high, jack high type hands. You know, the big blind's going to start folding some queen X. But do we want to? I honestly don't know. I don't know whether we want to check these sort of weaker backdoor flush draw type hands. Okay, so it looks like we just want to bet. We can generate folds from better hands, but there is some checking going on in there as well. This is one of those hands we talked about earlier. Middle pair and a backdoor flush draw, I think, checks quite frequently. Okay, checks 100% of the time. High equity combo draw, just wants to bet, I think. Okay, so there's a decent amount of checking here as well. Excuse me. King 3 just seems a bit too weak. Okay, well, I mean, there is some checking. I would have said this was just too weak. We're checking hands like King 3 of diamonds, King 4 of diamonds. So, yeah, interesting to see that King 3 of hearts just wants to continue. Ace Jack and Ace 10 were betting very frequently, maybe even for a bigger size. There was some big bets going in here with, you know, the best top pair type hands. This strikes me as a very easy check. We've had 10-9 off a couple of times now, but I think it had a spade both times. So I'm honestly not sure with this combo whether or not we would want to bet it. I think defaulting to a small bet seems reasonable. Looks like there was some bigger betting with the 10-9 off with a spade or a diamond or whatever it was before. All options available to us here. A6 off, similar to the A7 off. Yeah, seems to want to bet small quite a lot of the time. 5s, I think, was kind of on the edge of wanting to bet. Yeah, so there's a tiny bit of betting. I think 4s and 3s bets more frequently. All options available here. This strikes me as a hand I'd want to check. Okay, so I think there is a decent amount of checking with these ace-x hands, but actually, you know, facing the check from the small blind, remember they get to lead quite a lot here. We do just want to bet top pair quite frequently. This is quite similar to the 5-4. I assume we do a lot of checking. Okay, it's a bit more betting. We're going to try and get to 50. We're going to try and default to a bet here. We're not going too far wrong by betting very frequently. I think this is just always a check though. So I think we're finding like the checks. Yeah, the like the King X with a backdoor flush draw, King X of diamond hands. Okay, so this is our first like proper mistake. I think we had one earlier that was just like a few %, but you could still do it. Whereas here is a complete blunder, right? So it's never taking this size. It's just always wanting to check. Just has absolutely nothing. Blocks a lot of the hands that will fold. 8x of heart, 6x of heart hands. Just no real benefits to wanting to bet. So I guess this is the same. Okay, so this is where it definitely gets hard because you're just like, right, well, so 8-6 of hearts now is pure check, whereas 7-5 of clubs, no backdoors either, weaker hand. I mean, maybe it just wants to bet because it's a weaker hand, right? Is that potentially what's going on? I think queens and kings just always want to bet here. I think it is the aces that wants to check sometimes. Pass. Okay, so this is small bet and big bet, always wanting to bet this 7-5 of diamonds, which is interesting, and then this just always bets, but actually mixes in some big sizes as well. Cool. All right, so 47 out of 50, not too bad. That was the ace high board. I want to try one other ace high board if we get a chance to, because yeah, we're going to look at some other board types in a moment, but I think first I want to do another ace high board. So let's just do that. Okay, we're going to do this Ace-Eight-Deuce board. Let's start again with this ace high board. It's disconnected. Where are we? Ace-Eight-Deuce. So just really high frequency bet. Hopefully you guys can see that. Mixture of the two sizes, big bet and small bet. So interesting to see if that's the same when it comes to multi-way. In terms of equity, just really high equity once again for us. But this is button versus big blind. We now want to see like what happens if we factor in the third person. So before we saw that the small blind's equity was a lot higher than buttons, right? But now the buttons equity is the highest. So this would suggest there won't be as much leading for the small blind, and there'll be more betting for in position. So let's see if that's actually true. So there's much less betting. You can see for this is leading from the small blind, a lot less betting, which is good to see. Big blind still, not doing too well. And this time, I think there is some more betting. Obviously, not as much as button versus big blind. It's never going to be like that with the third player in there on this board with these ranges. But yeah, a lot more betting. So I think this is going to be somewhat easier. We just want to be betting a lot, unless we have like 7 6s and 5 4. That's one of the few, well, the only straight draw that we can have. So 5 4 with a flush draw, backdoor flush draw, we just check very frequently, and then clubs and hearts wants to bet. 7s and 6s are going to check a lot, and then we've got under pairs. Kings and queens don't really benefit from betting. Obviously, just we can be very far ahead, or both small blind and big blind could have top pair. So yeah, so there's just a lot of checking within this region. So there should be pretty straightforward. This seemed to be one of those higher frequency checks. Pairs, I guess we can do this. Can go fairly quickly, but basically there's just a lot more betting on this particular board. So we could, it's worth running the equities in Equilab, Flopzilla, whatever, Poker Cruncher I think can do it. Whatever you use to put the three ranges in. If you've got DTO pre-flop, you can actually download the exact ranges for this spot and put them into Equilab. That's exactly how I did it, and just run a variety of boards. We're going to go through them. As I said, we're going to do some more boards later on, but we're going to see like what the equities look like. When it switches from just 2 players to 3 players. But yeah, very frequently just going to be betting here. I don't think we need to spend too long on it, because it is just a lot of betting, and if it isn't, then it's just mixing check in there as well. Ooh, interesting. Yeah, this is one of the, we got king queen off with a spade, was just a really easy check. This is one of those sort of like pocket of hands around the kings, queens and jacks that checks, like king queen off, king queen suited, stuff like that. This is just I want to say a misclick, because I'm just going through it pretty quickly, but we're going to try and find those spots. 7-6 of diamonds then, interesting as another hand that we want to check, and that's exactly why we're doing it like this. 5-4 of diamonds and 5-4 of spades was a check, but 7-6 of diamonds I didn't pick from earlier. 9s we're going to go ahead and continue to bet. Okay, we've done 26, 92%, not too bad. I just wanted to sort of highlight the differences between the two boards. Both ace high boards, but this time we have more equity. We do a lot more betting. Yeah, let's just, before we wrap things up, let's see. Small blind does a decent amount of folding in this spot. They're just leading less frequently. In the first place, there are more hands, that haven't got anything and need to fold for want of a better explanation. And then you can see this time that the big blind isn't going to start folding any piece of the board. So this is very, very different from the last situation where the big blind was starting to fold some king X and some queen X hands on that ace king queen board. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for the A side boards. I mean, we could just do one more, just why not? Let's see if we can do. Trying to think, kind of like a middling, like an ace-9, like this ace-9-6 board. We know that ace high boards are very high frequency bets for button versus big blind in single raise heads up pot, but let's see what the situation is in this one. Ace-9-6 rainbow. So all right, so yeah, again, button's got high frequency, high equity, so I think we're going to see fewer leads than in the first example, but let's have a quick look. So a little bit more than the Ace-Eight-Deuce board, but less than the other one. Big blind should still be just checking a lot, and now we just get to bet very, very frequently once again. But it's the same kind of hands that want to check, right? So we're looking at the kings, queens, king, queen, king, jack, queen, jack, stuff like that. But we're also seeing some of the weakest 6x hands go for a check back as well. So if we are going to find some checks, checking back the weakest bottom pair type hands seems pretty reasonable. I think this is something that you see in single raise pots, heads up pots as well, where if there is some checking, almost betting the best bottom pairs and checking the worst ones, you see that again. That's sort of like I called it a D-linear earlier on, but like, yeah, betting the best and checking the worst. So yeah, so I think, if you wanted to run some equity calculations with the three ranges on different boards, if you do see high equity, then you're generally going to see just some more betting. But thinking about, is it worth betting a hand like pocket kings on this board? You are going to have some checks. It's probably not going to be worth it. You're either going to be putting money in against some ace-x hands or some draws. The ace-x hands don't fold, the draws don't fold, and then you can check back and play a turn in position. And again, you're still playing against two players worth of ranges in there as well. But it's not like you only ever check back top an under pair like pocket kings. You're going to check back some ace-x as well. Let's just confirm that to make sure that is exactly what's going on. Yeah, there's some ace-x that's checking back, top sets checking back, nines middle sets checking back, sixes is even checking back sometimes. So you're still going to have some hands to be able to call turns and rivers. But remember, if there's you check back, there's still three players in the hand. The small blind or the big blind, they can't just go crazy because there are still two players that they have to fight against. So it's not quite the same as playing heads up.